1963 to the 7th of November 1973. When I went out of prison, I was served with a restriction order, which was valid for 2 years. This restriction order was not allowing me, to get out of my hometown, which was East London, for any other purpose, either than, when I would get a permission from the Minister of Justice. And I was not allowed to get employed in a factory, as I was regarded as a dangerous enemy of the state who would sow revolutionary ideas to workers. So even visitors, we should not be more than one. When you come and see me at home, I should be indoors from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Now this was the state of affairs until the 30th of November 1975, and then thereafter, I was free to visit any place, and from there, I was once more detained for continuing with the same PEC activities, and until the 30th of April 1976, under Section 6 of Terrorism Act. And I was there until I was involved in the other trial, like accused number 5, the longest trial in the South African judicial history. The trial one ended on the 26th of June, and because the state failed to get evidence incriminating me about my activities outside prison, I was only convicted for my activities on Robben Island. I was given 5 years, suspended to 5 years. So this is a brief life history of mine. Now, as I am speaking here to you, my comrades, I come from a country which is still a colony, as people who are ruling the country originated from Europe, and as people who are ruling the country conquered the country from its rightful owners, and with arrogant conceit set themselves on the people, wielding political, economic, military, and cultural power. They are the people who are running everything. Everything is really in their hands. Ever since the white men arrived in occupied Azania, there have been endless wars as the Africans were resisting the invasion which was made by the white colonialists into their land. The wars were fought from 1652 until 1906, when Bambata, the last general to wage the war, was defeated. And when he was defeated, he made it clear to his people that as this land was conquered by the might of the sword, in other words, by violence, it will return to its rightful owners when they engage the enemy on the battlefield. As I say, the Africans felt that because of technical superiority of the white people, because really they were using, cannons and rifles, when our people were using only spears and shields. The Africans felt that they should now form themselves into a one nationwide political organization which will draw support from all, the black peoples. Hence, the South African Native National Congress was formed in 1912. What really prompted the African people to form this South African Native National Congress was the fact that after the discovery of gold and diamonds in my country, the British, came there and they fought with the Dutch over the control of the mines and over the overall control of occupied Azania. Now, when the war ended, the British felt that for their own economic convenience, they should transfer political power to the hands of the white minority. And as such, the Union of South Africa was formed in 1910. When this Union of South Africa was formed in 1910, the indigenous people were never consulted. They were never invited to participate in the talks. They were just told that as from them, they were under the white settler government and occupied Azania. Now, this thing made the Africans feel that this was really an affront to the dignity of the black people. For the fate of their country to be decided in the absence of the indigenous peoples. So they felt they should send deputations to the British monarch, as South Africa at that time was just self-governing and was in the British Empire. When they met Queen Victoria, she told them that this was really a local and a domestic issue, and it could be sorted out between the indigenous people and the white minority government at home. Now, the white minority government wouldn't really listen to the Africans because it regards, the white people in South Africa as people who are civilizers, who have come to civilize the indigenous people, whom they claim they found them naked, whom they claim they found them, fighting endless wars among themselves. People who can, who could hardly write, in other words, who were illiterate, in the true sense of the word, illiterate. So the white people felt that they could not really do things on the basis of equality with the indigenous people of Africa. Now, that being the case, when the Africans were found themselves, humiliated or disregarded, just at that time, the First World War broke out from 1914 to 1918. You know, the days of the Kaiser, when there was a war which was fought by Germany, against the British people. And the African people felt that they should show the white minority at home that the African people harbor no vengeance. They harbor no malice against the white minority. They are prepared to stand with the white minority whenever it was, facing external aggressions. And they were hoping that by their sacrifices, this might, change the hearts of the white minority, and perhaps they could come to a conference table, and there would be an improvement to the status quo. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Well, the depression which followed the First World War made the African laborers to form what was to be known as the Industrial and Commercial Workers Union. That was the ICU, which was formed under the leadership of Clemens Kadali in 1919. This was one group which really drew much support from the African people, because whenever an individual member of this ICU was victimized, the organization itself would take up the issue by confronting the employer and bringing the employer to court to account for victimizing a member of the ICU. Now, unfortunately, because now the organization was growing in number, and due to the level of thinking of the African people, as they were all out ready to show that they appreciate what they can learn from the white minorities, the Africans felt that they should invite an experienced trade unionist from Britain, whose name was Ballinger. Now, this fellow was invited to come and give guidance to the administration or leadership of this ICU. But when he came, the leadership of the ICU started quarreling amongst themselves. The ICU was very powerful in Natal under the leadership of Alison Champion. Now, this one started demanding the presidency of the ICU, fighting to oust Clemens Kadali. Now, Kadali was really somebody who was feared by white people at home. White people feared this man because he was very, very powerful. So now when, they could get a willing supporter in a man like Alison Champion, to them it was a heaven-sent opportunity. And they really managed to manipulate him, and the ICU finally disintegrated. Until today, in the ranks of the African freedom fighters in Azania, it is a general belief that it was this Mr. Ballinger who really drove a wedge, between Clemens Kadali and Alison Champion. Now, the white people, as they were ruling, they felt that though the African people had no direct representation in parliament, they could still be a threat because few of them in Cape Province were allowed to vote for white representative in the parliament. So they felt that, these qualification measures which were there could enable a larger number of Africans to qualify or to vote, and as the white minority is fewer than the indigenous people, they would find themselves swamped up. So they decided to remove the Cape voters who were Africans from the common voters roll to the separate voters rolls. So that it should be known whether the numbers could increase to 500 to 600, they should only vote for 3 white members of parliament. Nothing, bigger than that. Now this was resisted by the African people. The African people felt that instead of being removed from the common voters roll, they should rather be allowed to elect black members of parliament. And this vote should not only be confined to the province of the Cape, but it should be enjoyed by the black majority throughout the whole country. Now they decided to meet in Bloemfontein in 1935, and they formed what was to be known as the All-African Convention under the leadership of Professor D.T.T. Jabavu. Now this All-African Convention sent a deputation to see the then Premier, General J.B.M. Hertzog, who was responsible for piloting these bills. Because these bills were removing the Africans from the common voters roll. The Africans were now allowed to elect what was to be known as the Native Representative Council, or the NRC, which was to act in an advisory capacity whenever legislations affecting the black majority would be referred to this as an organ. Now, they were being told that at least they would be allowed to inhabit 13% of the land of occupied Tanzania, when they constitute more than 80% in the population of Tanzania. This really was regarded to be unjust, and if anything, it was really criminal. Now, on their way to see the white Premier, General J.B.M. Hertzog, they met a certain advocate, Multino, who was reputed to be liberal-minded. And this man told them that, oh, well, fellows, we are just, making a fuss because, truly speaking, there is more substance in the Hertzog bills than, in what you people, you are, presently, with what they were at that time enjoying. So, well, the Africans became divided, and as a result, the very All-African Convention itself disintegrated. Now, it became clear to the African youth in the African National Congress that the leadership of the African National Congress could be opportunistic, that they were people who could allow themselves to be misled, by people who claim to be supporting them, whereas they were not supporting them. So it was felt that they something should be done to rectify the situation. And Dr. A.B. Kumu decided to rename the South African Native National Congress to the African National Congress. And as the South African Native National Congress was confederal in structure, it was felt that it should now be organized on the branch level and on the provincial level. So there should be a provincial structure. And the youth decided to form what was to be known as the Congress Youth League. This was formed in 1944. And this Congress Youth League committed itself to the ideology of Africanism. The essence of this Africanism was that the African people were dispossessed of their land, and they can only regain it by working together as a one-disciplined national front against white supremacy. The African people were being told that they must not feel inferior to the white man. An African is entitled to the same dignity of man that the white man is entitled to. They were told that they should also, know that when, they are free, if they want to retain their independence, they should unite as one nation, because truly speaking, the experiences of African people in the whole continent are similar, and they happen to inhabit one continent. So really, the African people should regard themselves as one nation. Now, when this, came into being, it was the time when now not so long, in fact, at that time when the Afrikaner majority, the Afrikaner minority won in the elections, and their party was the National Party. And these people were stressing that by right of conquest, South Africa belongs to the white man. The Youth League came with the slogan, Maibuya Africa, saying that Africa should return to its original owners. Now, in 1949, because really the National Party government was all out, to legalize, of course, what was always there. It wanted to make this thing very clear that there should be no white man who should ever think that in future the evolution or development will lead to equality between the black people and the white people in what you people call South Africa. Now, as repression started intensifying, the African National Congress, in this conference in 1949, which was held in Bloemfontein, found itself, presented by the Congress Youth League with a document known as the Program of Action. The Program of Action committed the African National Congress to African nationalism. And it made it clear that the African people should be prepared to take positive action against this white oppression which is happening in our country. And African people should have nothing to do with dumb institutions, because this Native Representative Council turned out to be a dumb institution. As it was only meant for the black people, it was clear that whatever the black people would say in opposition to what was being promulgated as a legislation affecting them in the white parliament, that would not be taken into account. So Africans felt that it was really futile to be serving in that thing. If anything, the white people were doing this thing as a conscience salve to say that they govern the black majority by consent. They always consult them whenever they want to do anything affecting them. So they felt that no, they should have nothing to do with the dumb institutions. And it was made clear that they should embark on strikes, and they should work to raise funds for the organization. Now, the Program of Action having been accepted, in implementing it, a defiance campaign of unjust laws was launched in 1952, because I've already hinted that repression started intensifying. Abominable legislations like Group Areas Act, which were forbidding the Africans from staying in what were known as white areas, were promulgated. And the Africans found themselves, being told that it would be an unforgivable crime for a black man like myself to get married to a white woman. I should know that thing is not justifiable scripturally. And when the Africans are doing this thing, they have a church known as the Dutch Reformed Church, which is always comparing our situation with the occupation of Palestine by the Israelites during the days of Joshua and Moses, where God is reported to have decreed that there should be no intermarriages. Now these people also, they say that they're in the same positions. So it should be known that before the Lord, eyes of the Lord, it's an unforgivable crime for people of different races to get married. Now, as I have pointed out, the intensification of this repression made the Africans to launch this defiance campaign of unjust laws. Now, people were told that as they were to defy, and disregard all orders which were given to them, that they should not use lifts used by the white people, they should not sit, on benches which are used by the white people. They should always know that, what is good for the white people, they are not supposed, to share it. Right? Now, the Africans felt that they should defy this thing, and as they would be defying these unjust laws, when they are arrested, they should ask for no bail. And when they are charged for participating in the defiance campaign, they should, engage no services of a lawyer. And if they are found guilty and are being convicted with an option of the fine, they should not pay the fine. They should suffer for their convictions. Now, this slogan was violated, firstly, by the very leaders themselves. Dr. James Moroga, the then president of the African National Congress, was the very first person who started employing a lawyer to defend him. And where he was found guilty, of course, and was given the option of the fine, and he paid it. You know, there was so much confusion within the ranks of the, African nationalists that in no time a document was introduced, which document became to be known as the Freedom Charter in 1955. This document asserted that South Africa belongs to blacks and whites, and the people of South Africa are robbed of their land by a government which has been elected by white minorities, and the diversity of cultures should be respected. Now, this was really contrary to the program of action which had been accepted earlier on in 1949. And when members of the Congress Youth League started objecting, showing their opposition to this new thing which was brought in, because now this whole thing was embraced in a philosophy known as multiracialism. And as a result of this philosophy of multiracialism, which wanted to make, South Africa have a parliament where whites would represent themselves, blacks would represent themselves, Indians would represent themselves, so-called colors would represent themselves. Now, the African nationalists felt that this was really a deviation from what had been agreed upon in 1949. And when they expressed their opposition to this, some of them found themselves assaulted, some of them found themselves expelled. And the Congress Alliance came into existence, which aligned the African National Congress, the South African Congress of Trade Unions, the Colored People's Organization, the South African Indian Congress, and there were 5. Congress of Democrats, which was an organization of the white people who claim that they support 1 million vote, that is, there should be universal franchise amongst everybody in Azania. Now, there was a consultative committee which was formed, and this consultative committee was to have 2 members from each group, and even this thing was regarded to be very, very unfair, because really the Africans are a majority. Now, for them to be told that an organization of Congress of Democrats, which has, a membership not less than 100, to be told that they should have equal representation with the African National Congress, which had thousands of members, that thing was regarded to be unfair. And when now there was this controversy, the PEC felt that, the Africans felt that they had no option, but on the 2nd of November 1958, they should write to the leadership of the African National Congress to tell them that they are parting company with the African National Congress and they're going to go on their own. Hence, the Pan Africanist Congress was formed from the 4th to the 6th of April 1959. When the PEC was formed, it was formed at a time, when the whole continent of Africa was revolting against foreign dominations. Some of you must have heard of Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, who was firm on that independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked with the independence of the continent of Africa as a whole. Some of you might have heard of Lumumba, though of course he is described in the Western press as a man who was always smoking opium. Of course, his crime was that he was saying that he was going to make the Congo the hub of the whole continent of Africa. So the wealth of the people of Congo is not going to be enjoyed by Union Mamere and such Western, monopoly capitalists. As a result, he found himself eliminated. Now, what I'm going to show is there were such, people who were all out really to mobilize the African continent as a whole to stand firm and to stand against white supremacy. Now, the PEC emerged just at that time, and the Buddhists were feeling that, they would be insecure if nothing is being done to counter this spirit of African nationalism. Hence, they started, coming with Bantu stands, forming tribal committees in different ethnic groups, saying that the black people of South Africa are not one. They belong to different tribes. And such, they will be trained how to govern themselves. Hence, things like Transkei Territorial Authority came into existence. Now, this was rejected by the Africanists too, because it was seen as a dumb institutions which were manipulated by the white oppressors in order to safeguard their white rules, white minority interests. Now, this made the Africans to be firm on that. The first aim of the Pan Africanist Congress is to rally and unite the African people into one national front under the banner of African nationalism. I've already pointed out that African nationalism is a unifying force which welds the Africans so that they should emerge as a nation. And this Pan Africanist Congress is a nationwide political organization which is non-tribal and non-regional based. And that thing has been maintained ever since the inception of the peace until today. You find people who are speaking Sotho there, right in the leadership. People speaking Xhosa, people speaking Zulu, people speaking Tswana, Pedi, etc. Now, all those who subscribe to the slogan Africa for Africans are accepted as members by the PEC. And the PEC started organizing itself. It really managed to make a breakthrough even in the countryside. Now, it was never, known that in the Transkei, branches would be organized among the very peasants, and that was done by the Pan Africanist Congress. 1960, the anti-pass campaign was launched. The PEC felt that as the African people are fighting white domination, for years and years, they were always told that they're inferior to the white people. For years and years, they were told that the white people are very powerful militarily, and they should never entertain hopes of confronting them and think that they would succeed. Instead, they would just be mowed down like flies. Now, it was felt that Africans should be made to be liberated mentally. Hence, the pass was picked up as a thing which would be a start. Because this document, the pass, is carried only by the indigenous people of Africa in Tanzania. And whenever a policeman demands an African to produce the pass, he must produce it. Failure to produce it would make an African liable for arrest. And in this document is written his name, the place of his residence, where he is working. And if he doesn't work perhaps for 3 months, he must be arrested. And if he is sacked from job, that thing must be written there. And if an African wants to leave one city to another, whether he's going to attend a funeral of a relative of his, he must get a permission from the magistrate. So really this pass was regarded as the belt of slavery, and it was the starting point. Now when the Africans were to launch this anti-pass campaign, they were told that the campaign would be non-violent, and nobody should do any act of violence. Otherwise, we shall be provoking the police. What at the moment we are prepared to do is to die for our cause. We are not yet prepared to kill. And the Minister of Justice was, written to by the President of the PEC, that was Mangaliso Sobogwe, asking him not, in fact, to instruct his police not to give unreasonable orders, to the African people, as they will be marching to the police stations and surrender themselves for arrest because of refusing to carry passes. And it was felt that this start would be a sound one, because if many Africans would be arrested for refusing to carry passes, this thing is going to deprive, the economy at home, which rests on the pillars of cheap labor of the black people. It would be deprived of manpower, and as such, the government would be forced really to consider this thing, and from there, really a campaign after another campaign would follow until we attain our goal of the right of self-determination. Now, when the people started responding positively to the call of the Pan Africanist Congress under the leadership of Mangaliso Sobogwe, the Commissioner of Police, Radimea, started suspending the passes because he was feeling that the position was becoming uncontrollable, and the stock exchange lost something like 421 million rand, right, because of this campaign. And the Western capital started now, running away. You see, they were scared. They didn't know whether a revolution was just starting. Now, the Commissioner of Police felt that he should suspend the passes, hoping that this would stem the tide. And well, after that was done, all leaders were arrested. Of course, PEC people had already been arrested because they'd marched to the police stations to surrender themselves for arrest. Now, despite the fact that our people had marched peacefully to the police stations, they found themselves perishing from the rifle fires. Right? People who had hardly thrown even a stone to a policeman, they found themselves so shot. Hence, you always hear of 67 people who were shot in Sharpeville. Hence, you always hear of over 20 people who were shot at Langa and in other areas. Now, when this happened, the political organizations, both the PEC and the ANC, were banned by the oppressive regime. And when they were banned, the PEC, on summing up its experiences, it decided that it was high time that whenever an action was taken, it should be backed up by military action. Hence, it decided to form a military wing, which was to be known as BOCO in September. In 1961, the organization was reorganized, and it was well established, and in no time, really, the network started functioning again. Now, when the oppressive minority felt that it was threatened, it started feeling uneasy, and in no time, the military wing started intensifying its struggle against the white oppressors. When people were killed at Bashi, at Pearl, at Queenstown, from the end of 62 to early 63, there were many people who were arrested, many people were hanged because of participating in the Pan Africanist Congress, which was all out to overthrow white oppression. The PEC people were the very first people to be sentenced to life terms of imprisonment. People like John Gosi, Jafta Masimola, who were very young when they were convicted in 1963. Now, people like myself also found themselves convicted to 10 years because I was in the group of people who carried sharpened swords with a view to fight the enemy, because we're feeling that rather than we be, counted amongst people who are docile and submissive to what is going on, let us make a start, and others will come in with perfect methods of fighting the enemies. Now, we found ourselves imprisoned, and when we were imprisoned, we were really subjected to hellish conditions. We were made to regret why we ever identified ourselves with the struggle. We were made to know very clearly that an African has no right to demand the right of self-determination in these countries. The white people are superior, and as they are superior and civilized, they are the people who will dole out peaceful freedom to the African people. They are the people who know what is best for the African peoples. So really, that really didn't shock us, because even after we went out of prison, we found that the underground, movement was still going on, and we had to join ranks with our fellows, but we found ourselves once more arrested. Hence, there was this lengthy death trials. Until today, the masses at home are waiting for direction, and the Pan Africanist Congress, as it is the vanguard of the liberation struggle in Tanzania, is determined to fight to the finish. We're not prepared to allow ourselves to be counted as people who are complacent with the situation when we know that what is being done is an affront to our dignity as the African people. And we are clear on that, as the enemy is well armed, as the enemy is propped up by the Western imperialists and the capitalists. That being so, the war may go on for a long time, but we are not going to rest until white oppression is overthrown at home. I think I must end the many questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open the floor for questions. Any questions? Can we floor around?
I'd like to hear more specifically about the conditions on Robben Island.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Now, on Robben Island, when we were convicted, I've already hinted that the warders, as the prison security, were all out to dehumanize us and make us regret for having participated in the liberation struggle. When we arrived there, every white warder, because the staff there is mainly white, there are no Africans, or so-called coloreds who are working there as warders. So these white warders were always carrying batons and sticks. They were always beating us. Whenever we returned from work, we would be stripped naked and be searched if we were not carrying weapons. Even when we were asleep at night, warders could open the cells and search us, because they were always saying that they have information that we were plotting to kill the white people, even when we were in jails. Now, we were not allowed to get newspapers, for it was felt that we should not know what is happening in the outside world, because if we know we may know that the Southern government is being challenged from all quarters and also Montreal of the High. That goes the same with the radios. And when we were there, we were, allowed to do some study under very severe conditions. Many of our people lost large sums of money because they have not registered in universities of correspondence colleges, which were approved by the, prison authorities. And the food was very bad, right? And as a result, many people died of malnutrition. And Rhode Island is in the Mediterranean regions, and really we're not very used to this type of climate. And we're ill-clad, we're not given proper, clothes as well convicts. Now, the position was such that many of us died of cancer. They were deliberately neglected because the white writers were always saying that if you happen to capture us, you black people, you are only bloodthirsty, you do nothing, to save our brothers who are captives. There was one time when in Zambia, 2 white tourists were reported to have been shot over the Zambezi. Right? Now, we were not aware of what had happened, but we found that we were to suffer because of that. Even when the revolution started in Mozambique in 1964, we found ourselves beaten. When we asked, partner, what is happening? We said, what have we done really? It was said, no, your brothers are killing white people. So whenever the revolution struggle starts, outside prison, people on the island will find themselves, confronted by the white warders. They'll bring dogs to eat them. Those dogs are specifically trained to trail or track down armed freedom fighters. Now they will be brought to us when we can hardly handle their guns. All this was always done with a view to break our morals. That's a brief review of the island.
Any other further questions? Okay, I'll recognize you first, and then you can speak.
Okay, I was just wondering what kind of a solution you foresee, because surely just, as you said, overthrowing the white government is not a solution for the South African people.
That's a very good question too. Now, we envisage to establish a non-racial socialist democratic societies. Now, we want Azania to be a unitary state where all people who owe their sole allegiance to this country will be accepted as Azanians, where people will be enjoying equal rights, where there will be no discriminatory laws against one group of people because they happen to originate from Asia, against one group of people because they happen to originate from Europe. But we shall be concerned with people who stay there as citizens. And we feel that if that is so, then we shall make the point that everybody should be allowed to vote for our government, and our people will be free to express themselves freely without any form of intimidation. And people will have the right to worship, and they will have the right to organize trade unions, farmers' councils, farmers' cooperatives, and such things. Now, economically, our people are subjected to poverty. Our people have been exploited for years and years. They have no stake in the economy of the country. So we envisage a socialist form of society where people will hold in common the means of production and share in accordance with their needs the fruits of their collective labor. In other words, we do not envisage a situation where land will be a marketable commodity, where we'll find one, Rockefeller owning the whole country, where we'll find, a Harry Oppenheimer, dictating to the government what is to be done because he happens to own the means of production. That is not going to happen, and we are not compromising about that fact. We are going to make the point that the wealth of the country is used to uplift the economic and social standards of our people. Education should be free and compulsory. There should be free medical services. Right? As people, will find the state doing these things for them, they too have to, cooperate with the state and work together in the building of Azanians. Now, it is our firm belief that the African people are one, really. See. You know, this thing of boundaries, that rivers should be used as boundaries, was a thing which was, you know, agreed upon by the white colonialists when they happened to meet in Berlin in 1884. Now, we're not party to those resolutions, and as such, when we achieve independence, we intend, you know, persuading the other governments of Africa and the people of Africa to unite and form one central government. Because, you know, in many parts of Africa, you always hear of famine, you always hear of hunger. Oh, well, we hope that, you know, because really, Africa is endowed with mineral wealth. For instance, the very Congo River itself in Zaire can, you know, produce hydroelectricity, which can supply not only the continent of Africa, but also the whole of Europe. Now, this is the type of a thing which make us feel that, you know, our salvation lies in our African unity, in that we shall pool our resources together and work, you know, for the development of the continent of Africa. And if Africa is united and starts forming one huge military structure, there is no part of Africa which will just be attacked by the imperialists. As you might have heard about the imperialist invasion of Guinea in 1970, as they have done in the past in places like the Congos. We shall, you know, act such that what happens in one part of Africa affects the other parts of Africa as a whole. And it's only then when we speak with one concerted voice, you know, in international forums, that what we say will be taken into account. In other words, Africa will occupy a position among the nations of the world when we happen to form one central government. Thank you.
Can I just follow up on the question?
Allow me one more follow-up and then go ahead.
Okay, I was just wondering, see, that's all very, those are all very good theories and ideals. But I mean, practically, what do you see the PAC, what kind of a role is the PAC doing to sort of enforce those ideals? And secondly, you're very strong on unity, but if other black South Africans do not agree with you, don't you foresee a very similar situation to the Angolan situation developing when black South Africans actually do possess power?
Yes. Now, with the liberation struggle, the PAC is implementing its own programs. In the labor front, in the students front, PAC people are there. The only thing is, PAC has resolved on not doing things for publicity. We don't think it's necessary to say this trade union movement or that there's a strike in this plant, Ford company in Port Elizabeth, or a strike in Wilson Sugar Factories, or Swiss factory, is because of PAC being responsible. That is not necessary, because really we know the repressive laws at home. That when we dare say so, our people will start suffering, whereas there is more which they can do without necessarily boasting to the world. Now, on the question of you know, our attitude to other freedom fighters, the people there, for instance, the only way you recognize PAC and ANC, there is also the Black Consciousness Movement, which was founded by the late Steve Biko. Now, there are very warm relations between these two groups. In the other trial, there were prominent figures of the Black Consciousness Movement who happened to be associated with the PAC and were charged for, you know, working with the PAC with a view to overthrow white supremacists. Right. Now, with the ANC, of course, we have our ideological differences with them, but we don't regard them as our enemies. Our enemy is white supremacy. Our leadership has always, you know, tried to invite the ANC people to act jointly with the PAC, even in this very anti-pass campaign. Right. They were invited, but unfortunately, they felt that the timing was no good, and they became negative in the whole thing. So, but, you know, despite all of that, as the OAU Liberation Committee has approached these two movements to sing their differences and work together, the PAC has responded very positively. And, you know, at home, there is always, you know, mutual consultation and mutual understanding between members of PAC, ANC, and the PCMs. But of course, I think our advantage at home is that we are always harassed by the enemy, and the enemy is always chasing us around. Whereas, with people who have long left home or in the external mission, really, these things, they remember them when they read the newspapers. But when the struggle starts intensifying, when the Burus start bombarding indiscriminately of whether the person belongs to the PAC or the ANC, we shall all be sober. We do believe that very strongly, that it will always be them that will feel that our salvation lies in unity. When with the independent states of Africa, we're aware that we may experience some difficulties, but when you know that there are people of Zambia who are working in Tanzania, people of Ivory Coast who are working in Ghana, just making examples, these ideas really can be taught to those people. Those people can, let me put it this way, they can be popularized to those people so that they should go back to their countries and show the importance of oneness and the importance of unity. Thank you.
Okay, you had a question.
You've answered my question through answering him.
About 3,000 students staged a noisy march on various government buildings this afternoon. The students were protesting against planned education cutbacks by both the provincial and federal governments. Michael James has more.
It was an afternoon filled with fun and symbolism when about 2,500 students assembled at McGill University for one of the largest demonstrations against education cutbacks held in Montreal this year. The students, who came from universities and CEGEPs all over the Montreal region, were participating in a so-called National Week of Action proclaimed by the Canadian Federation of Students. There were similar demonstrations in every major Canadian city today. The students first marched to the Hydro-Quebec building where Premier Lévesque has his Montreal offices. There, they joined up with about 500 students from the University of Quebec and several East End CEGEPs. The students then crossed the street and chanted at the Guy Favreau complex, a symbol for them of misspent federal government money. After that, it was down the street to the Ville-Marie Autoroute extension, another symbol of misspent funds, this time provincial. Then it was off to the doors of the Palais de Justice for a symbolic demand for justice. Once assembled there, the students turned and symbolically faced east to Quebec City, then west to Ottawa. At a press conference earlier this morning, student leaders told reporters what they hope to achieve with their march.
Well, what we feel now is that it's time to turn to the public and to explain to the public what the situation is, to explain how we are demonstrating not against the public and against the government, for the public, and against the attitude of the government in regards of education and social services in general.
There have been other large demonstrations against government education cutbacks so far this year. They haven't had much effect on government policy. Perhaps the intensity of this one may change legislators' minds. Michael James, CBC News, Montreal.
Marched on the National Assembly. Again, the message was cutbacks are creating a crisis in education. Most of these students attend colleges and universities in the Quebec City area. While they were protesting outside, the minister responsible for education, Camille Laurent, was inside the National Assembly answering questions about the cuts. Laurent said the government had no choice about cutting back, but he promised to reach a consensus with those concerned before slashing any more. Ottawa's going to...
Au niveau collégial, menace de hausse de frais de scolarité, voilà quelques effets des coupures déjà effectuées par le gouvernement québécois. Mais la manifestation d'aujourd'hui visait également et peut-être surtout le gouvernement fédéral. Les étudiants déplorent qu'à 20 jours de l'expiration des accords fiscaux entre Ottawa et les provinces, aucune lueur d'espoir n'est en vue. Ils estiment d'ailleurs que dans ce dossier, l'éducation est devenue une véritable monnaie d'échange entre deux paliers de gouvernement.
On est pris au milieu. Les arrangements fiscaux terminent le 31 mars. Pas d'entente, pas une lueur d'entente. Et c'est pas seulement l'éducation, c'est les services sociaux aussi. Les étudiants dans la rue aujourd'hui manifestent pour l'éducation et les services sociaux. Et pour que les deux ordres de gouvernement prennent en main leurs responsabilités, déterminent les priorités, puis travaillent dans les intérêts du public, pas dans les intérêts de la puissance fédérale, provinciale, etc.
Si les étudiants sont unanimes à dénoncer les coupures budgétaires en éducation, il n'en demeure pas moins divisé sur un certain nombre de questions concernant le financement de l'éducation postsecondaire au Québec. Par exemple, cette question du gel des salaires pour les professeurs de plus de 30 000 $ par année, ou encore l'implication accrue du fédéral dans la question de l'enseignement postsecondaire sont des sujets qui divisent largement les étudiants, eux qui s'affichent comme étant des victimes d'un conflit on ne peut plus politique. Ici Gilles Sénécal, à Montréal. Economic mismanagement and budget cuts have led to a deterioration of services, particularly in social affairs and education. The demonstrators complained of reductions and closings of some courses, libraries, laboratories, and other school services, enrollment restrictions, larger classes, and higher tuition fees. Organizers urged the governments to get their priorities straight.
The one thing that has been lacking over the past 2 or 3 years is for a government to stand up and say, well, we believe in education, we believe in hospitals, we believe in community centers. What has happened actually is government is cutting back in a very administrative sort of way every department which it has. Now, where the priorities lie in there? What we're seeing is education is biting the dust. We're seeing the very infrastructure of society is going to crumble, right?
They also passed the Ville-Marie Expressway, pointing out that its extension will cost $120 million, almost as much as the $150 million cut from this year's education budget. The noisy but peaceful demonstration wound up at the Palais de Justice, symbolic, said the students, because it is justice they are demanding. Herb Luft,
Universitaires, anglophones et francophones, se sont unis pour attirer l'attention sur l'intention d'Ottawa de diminuer les sommes allouées à l'éducation par le biais des accords fiscaux. Les étudiants appuient les recteurs des universités qui contestent l'émission d'Ottawa dans les secteurs qui relèvent des provinces. Le gouvernement du Québec n'a lui non plus été épargné et les coupures budgétaires imposées dans le secteur de l'éducation ont été fortement critiquées. Les étudiants craignent une hausse inévitable des frais de scolarité, une diminution des services et des contingentements sévères dans plusieurs disciplines. Le 3 avril prochain, ils se joindront à la Supermanif organisée par les 3 centrales syndicales du Québec, manifestation contre les coupures dans les secteurs des affaires sociales et de l'éducation. Ici Janine Morin, à Montréal.
Un violent incendie a complètement détruit